get a little bit rest in the middle of the day, and then work hard again, and then get some rest. And that was kind of like how our body was. So people a lot of times associate that crash or whatever with like, oh, I had maybe something that was like too much of a simple carbohydrate.
You got your carbohydrates, and you got your proteins, and you got your fats.
Right now, the majority of the health issues that we deal with are because of surplus.
Don't overdo it. Keep it still semi-restricted, but enough in so that way you can keep your energy levels high.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Epic.
What the hell?
How's it going? So great topics today. I feel like it's going to be a fun topic.
Yeah, we get a ton of questions around this. It's around nutrition. You know, they're like, hey, you two guys, you know, you're old, but you seem like you're in shape. You know, hey, can you fill us in on what you guys do? And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, nutrition is kind of part of the whole science of medicine, and it's such a big part of it that we're gonna have a whole episode just around nutrition.
Yeah, boy, we're mentioning old, like, yeah, because it's like you think to yourself, I do feel like it, because like people that we grew up like watching, like Hulk Hogan just died, and then like Ozzy Osbourne, all these people that you're like, man, I grew up watching those people. Right. They're dropping like flies now. What the hell? Anyways, yeah. So
and you see some of these young influencers or people up and coming, and you're like, man, you're young. Why do you look like that? You know, like come on, dude. Like
you just get out of like middle school. What the shit? Yeah, so yes, we get a lot. I mean, the topic today when we talk about like meal prepping and what kind of food should I be eating, and like all these like myths, and we do some myth busting today in regards to like
let's do it.
Sugar crashes and like if
protein,
I eat certain things, like
do I need how much of this? And back in the day, the whole it's unhealthy to eat any fat. And you're like, that's just crazy. Like,
right. One of the things I guess I always. For me, when people ask me to like get into the weeds, number one, when I can always tell like, and even today I'll try to like hold back when I start getting too like in depth and start going into biochemistry. I look at their eyes and they just start kind of glazed over like, what the shit, man? He's telling me about like biochemistry shit. I just want to know like, tell me what I should be eating, what I shouldn't be eating, and then I like, okay, fair enough. Just try to keep it simple. So Liz, today, if I start talking technical, just smack me in the head and tell me to stop. And let's just keep it simple.
Keep it simple because that's what it is. Nutrition doesn't have to be complicated. But one of the things, and I think you just mentioned this too, is that people complain about things like my sugar crash and my sugar this and my sugar that. And when should I, again, and there's so much now around carbohydrates and sugar and all that stuff. Maybe we can start with that, as a macronutrient. We talk about macro and micro. As a macronutrient and sugar crashes, what can we do about that?
Yeah, and I always like to, with a lot of these episodes, I go back to our basics, go back to the roots. When we were cavemen and our ancestors running around just trying to find nutrients, our bodies, we weren't like,
we're still cavemen, let's be real.
Yeah, like, when we were back in the day running around just trying to survive and not being eaten by tigers or whatever the animal or whoever the predator was at the time, we weren't worried about like our macro and micros, and we were doing pretty darn good at that point. In fact, our body actually did best when we were actually in scarcity. I feel like right now, the majority of the health issues that we deal with are because of surplus. And when we say like anything, too much of anything is never good. And that goes back to the basics. And nowadays we live in a world with a lot of influencers out there where we see like, oh, this, like Huberman said this and Peter Thiel said that. And it's like, yeah, if you're trying to be an elite, like Olympic gold medal winner, sure, you might want to like get to that level where like every micro, like microgram that goes in your body. But if you're just like our ancestors who are just trying to survive and stay alive and do well and feel good, one thing is scarcity. I actually am a big proponent of that. I say like try to keep the calories down. So when we say like keep the macros to moderation, everything in moderation, right?
When we speak about macros, again, there's really three main macronutrients, right? Probably start with that. You got your carbohydrates, and you got your proteins, and you got your fats, right? Mm-hmm. Now, some will argue that another one is alcohols, right? Because alcohol would be another thing because of the way our body, uses them and things like this. But fats, you're going to have your healthy, fats we talk about, and then your unhealthy processed foods and things that are unhealthy for you. And then your carbohydrates, you're going to have your simple carbs, and you're going to have your more complex carbs and your fiber carbs, in other words. And then proteins, right? So there's going to be again, same thing, your healthy and unhealthy proteins. And we see so many people now, I'm going on a carnivore diet and I'm going to have this and I'm going to have that. But let's focus in on the carbohydrates component of it in terms of, because one thing that we see a lot of and people talk to us about is I get a crash in the afternoon around 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I get this crash. And everyone always pushes that back to, I'm getting a sugar crash, or I have a sugar high, or I have and we look at it and we're like, yeah, that's not the way the biochemistry works. It doesn't, from a perspective like that. So there's a lot around that, and that crash is probably happening for a lot of other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And we're blaming a macronutrient for it, but it's probably not the only reason for it. Carbohydrates, for sure, are every cell in our body, including our brain. And I think we talked about this before in a different episode of how the brain uses almost more than any other organ in our body, uses more carbohydrates or nutrients or energy than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So that way we're making sure that we're taking in enough carbs throughout the day in a moderate perspective. So like you mentioned, don't overdo it. Keep it still semi-restricted, but enough in so that way you can keep your energy levels high.
So our body has all kinds of homeostatic hormones that keep our blood levels at a pretty even. And so unless you have like some health condition, that's, we know that there are certainly health conditions out there that can cause that. So we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind that from a homeostasis perspective, meaning keeping things in a nice steady state, our body does pretty darn good. When it comes as a machine, it's pretty good with that. So again, unless there's like actually a truly medical problem with you, majority of the time, those kind of things, those crashes, we go back to our roots. Our circadian rhythm cycle is, we were designed to kind of be like, hey, very active early in the morning and then maybe take some rest in the middle of the day when the sun has really had its hottest on top of us. We were designed to go get some shade in the middle of the day. And our body was kind of designed to be that, right? So it's like one of those where, hey, it's work really hard in the morning, then get a little bit rest in the middle of the day, and then work hard again, and then get some rest. And that was kind of like how our body was. So people a lot of times associate that crash or whatever with like, oh, I had maybe something that was like too much of a simple carbohydrate. Now, maybe it was like, hey, you were having some caffeine, and as the caffeine gets out of your system, that heightened alertness that, was in there because of the caffeine, now the caffeine's coming out of your system, and maybe you're not as alert. But those are kind of like, body's complex, and there's a lot of things you have to take in consideration there.
I like that. So maybe it's a good time for us to then kind of segue over to another thing that we want to talk about. It's how people have now become reliant on some of these things, including some of these processed foods, or you mentioned caffeine or coffee, or energy shots and drinks. And they've now, because, I don't understand that my body actually has mechanisms to always keep me in a pretty steady state, and I'm probably not crashing. But then what ends up happening is they start to rely on other things for either their nutrition or their intake, or they're using it because they're needing that pump or that surge at that time. Mm-hmm. How can we potentially help our listeners here to, again, not rely on some of those things and potentially come up with other different ways? And what have we seen people rely on or falsely rely on those kinds of things?
We are habits or creatures of habit, like you've said, like about habit stacking and creating systems. And, when we say like doing things more than 2 or 3 times, and when it starts becoming routine and becoming a habit, we also in ourselves, how do we start to develop those routines of like waking up consistently at the same time every morning, working on taking our meals and doing some either meal prepping and or making sure that our meals are consistent amount of calories and or type that we tend to do better with, because it's understanding what you tend to do better with, and then keeping it so that way you're not exceeding those meals. And so it's waking up consistently, it's getting the proper times and the routines and habits of getting that exercise in, making sure that you're either meal prepping or making sure that your macros and you're getting the right amount of total calories, and then breaking it down to whatever your goals are. So if you're somebody who wants to get more muscle mass, yeah, you're going to have to take a little more protein in. If you're somebody who wants to keep the weight and keep more lean, you're going to have to decrease overall calories and, maybe cut down a little bit more on the fat. If you're somebody who maybe has some family history and or personal history of like things like diabetes or maybe vascular history, there's certain foods that you're going to want to stay away from. So I'll let you talk to some of that.
No, that's a good point. So again, so you mentioned a couple of things. So it all depends on the person and what kind of conditions they have. So it goes back to personalizing it. And if I have high blood pressure, then I probably stay away from caffeine anyway because it's going to spike my pressure. Now, coffee and caffeine is not a bad thing. So, again, we get a lot of people saying, oh, I got to cut back on my caffeine or my coffee. It's a problem when you're starting to get withdrawals if you if you come off of it. That's when we say that, yeah, you're probably a little too reliant on some of these supplements or these foods and nutrients. It's where, boy, if I come off of it, I'm going to I actually get withdrawal symptoms. I get bad headaches, or if I get in palpitations or tremors or shakes, well, you're probably a little bit too much on those things. So those are some of the things you got to keep an eye out for. It's, again, I'm probably a little bit too reliant on it, and I need to then come out. And if you're one of those individuals, it's go, 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 and I don't, as you mentioned, meal prep, and I don't have a plan for the day and haven't created healthy habits, then what ends up happening is you're going to start, your body's going to tell you, because of homeostasis and trying to keep you at where you're supposed to be, your body's going to tell you that you need to get something in you. And then what ends up happening is, because of poor planning, we end up buying chips, or we're relying on cookies, or whatever's in my drawer, or whatever my friend or colleague next to me has, or a vending machine, and that's never a good way of doing it. So, and that's why we see people all of a sudden becoming too reliant on those things, and they're getting into trouble. And probably a good idea now to talk about some of the stuff that we just mentioned frequently in this last bit is around prepping, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how could we potentially help individuals out there prep better, right? What are some lazy ways to prep quickly and better, so that way it doesn't require a lot of energy and macros to then do the prepping, so that way they actually can get through their day, but not have the crashes, and also making sure that they're not then relying on things that they shouldn't be relying on. Like us, follow us,
follow all the stuff, make sure that you hit the like buttons, all those different things that
ring
people
the
are supposed
bell,
to say.
do the thing you're supposed to do, hit the subscribe thing, whatever it is.
Come on in.
Send in the pigeon, carrier pigeon in.
Smoke screens, it's cool.
However else it is that you can. Again, make sure you're following us, and hopefully you'll learn a little something, and you'll have some fun.
Yeah. What the hell?
How do you, in a busy day and managing all these different teams and things that you have going on, get to the point where it's relatively easy for you?
Yeah, and to your point, I think everybody is an individual. So for me individually, I've always managed things well by doing more of intermittent fasting, where I generally go off of a meal a day. And because I'm also neurotic about the total calories and the type of foods in there, a lot of times for me and I try to keep my muscle mass. I focus more on making sure I'm getting proper protein. Over time experimented with different things like protein bars and foods that are quick and easy for me because I'm busy lifestyle and on the go. So it's a lot of making sure I'm getting proper protein, making sure I'm getting the right amount of calories, not too much, not too little, and making sure that it's something that is palatable for me, but getting me all the right stuff. So again, a lot of times I've over time kind of fine-tuned it to certain types of protein bars that I really enjoy eating, and I'll have one of those in the middle of the day, and then I'll have my specific meal that I'll have at the end of the day that's very finite. But again, to the meal prepping for individuals. But that's why again it's kind of a tough question to answer, because everybody's individual and really has their own goals. So, but there's some general guidelines that we can give for meal prepping.
I love it. So let's maybe talk about that next. Moving into the next section here, it's more around. Again, if we can think about, maybe you mentioned again, you supplement or you do meal alternatives with things like protein bars and protein shakes and some of these things. So you're either alternating, or you're changing and you're using that as an alternative for a meal. And then sometimes you're also supplementing too. So you're either supplementing, and we get a lot of controversy because a lot of people out there, they talk about, okay, supplements. Should I be taking them? Should I not? Is it just BS? Is it a scam? And versus alternative meals and alternative these types of things that you can use as alternatives for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or in your case, like you mentioned, which is a well-studied thing now in terms of these time-restricted feedings to keep weight management, as well as from just a healthy perspective. Time-restricted feedings is a very good thing to do if for the right person, back to individualized. But again, how do we want to coach everybody around supplementation. What is a supplement versus, and is it something that you should be doing? Is there any standards across the board for everybody? And then the alternative foods that we potentially would, or alternatives to meals, and what would we recommend for that?
Keeping the calories in check is first and foremost in my mind, because again, going back to our roots of like, hey, our ancestors, our bodies were designed and work efficiently when there's scarcity.
Fundamentals, energy in, energy out.
Right.
Sure.
So balancing that, making sure that, and then we're talking about prepping is, if you're going to be creating your meals, you're going to want to lead more towards what we call the Mediterranean type of diet, where it's, you've got the greens, you've got, the greens, veggies, and you've got some of the nuts, the tree nuts,
as long as you're not allergic, right?
Right.
Oh, yep.
For sure.
Good omegas, omega-3, 6 and 9s in them.
So the omegas, and then, getting, for both the omega-3, but also for making sure that you're getting a good amount of protein in there as well. So those are like some of the things that you do want to make sure you're getting when you're doing your meal prepping.
So that's your healthy meal, and then your meal preps, and then making sure that you're hitting those types of things. And then if you're doing an alternative, as you mentioned, there are several different, and not going to endorse any, but there are several different protein supplements out there, or meal supplements that you can do, whether it's a liquid then you drink it, or it's something that you're eating, or you can powders and you mix. They're all going to be, again, good potential alternatives. And if you're somebody who's keen on, boy, it's got to be organic, that's great. Or if you're more of, hey, I don't want to eat anything and it's more vegetarian. There's so many different alternatives out there now. But then and again, it's an alternative and it's to replace or meal replacement. You just don't want to make sure that you're taking that on top of all the other things you're doing, and then your calories in, calories out, or you're more in than out, and you're going to get into trouble.
Right.
But now let's flip over to maybe the last segment we can talk about is the supplements themselves. So again, we get a lot of people coming back to us, supplements. Again, should I be taking them? Should I not be taking them? Is it a scam? We saw this huge surge of influencers who are promoting the heck out of supplements, and they're like, yeah, you got to take these things, and this one is a 10 out of 10, and this one's a 7 out of 10, and this one's a 0 out of 10. How do people know like what they should be taking and all this information out there?
Yeah, great question. In regards to
what is a supplement?
Yeah, so just like the term sounds like, supplement is something you're taking extra or you're supplementing. There's a difference between correcting by giving for something that's deficient. So like again, somebody could be like vitamin B12 deficient or iron deficient. At that point, we're supplementing to get them into like a regular steady state.
Right.
Versus you're supplementing to help improve and enhance. In that regard, then we look at these days, and again, there are a lot of people who are like influencers online in the online space of like things like taking things that might help your mitochondria, or things that might help your neurons, or things that might help like your muscles, or
eyeballs, and your ears, and
right,
your penis length,
and that's the stuff when we start talking about like now. We start getting an overload, where I know some people who are taking 1,000 different supplements, and it's like, oh, this one is for my muscle, this one's for my mitochondria, this one's for my neuron, this one's for my blah blah. That's when again you start saying like, hey, if you're having a well balanced meal in today's society, I mean, it's hard to not get the proper nutrients that your body needs.
Sure.
And then in that case, if you're trying to supplement because you're an elite Olympic athlete that you're trying to get a gold medal, and you're burning through, but even in that regard, if they're eating well-balanced meals, they're usually getting the majority of things, unless you're, again, wanting to try to enhance something. In that case, you might even get yourself in trouble.
Absolutely. So then it goes back to, again, supplementation means that you're trying to, you are supplementing. So either for deficiency or for enhancement. And enhancement, again, whether it's longevity or it's because you're trying to do things like you're, trying to get to peak performance, that's great. But there are certain supplements that are water soluble, and that means if you take in more than you need, you're really just going to eventually get very expensive urine, right? That's really what it comes out, because you're just going to urinate it out. It's not going to be absorbed. You don't store it, in other words,
right? And
it's just going to be expelled. So you just have to be careful. And there are certain supplements too that if you overdo it, it's going to cause problems, because it will stack, it will store inside of you, and it can cause problems.
Right.
So first and foremost, from what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that, are you truly deficient? And if you're deficient, then that's fine. Then you will need to have supplementation, but get tested and see if you are actually deficient. And if you're not deficient and you're eating balanced meals or alternatives, and you're getting what you need in, you don't need to spend the money on those supplements. Now, on the other hand, if you're trying to become, again, peak performance and some of these other things that you're trying to do, it still goes back to, then you may want to get tested. And is it actually helping? There are a lot of different biofunctional markers and other ways, VO2 max testing and some of these other things that will tell us whether or not you truly are getting supplemented to the point of that type of performance level. Then I would say you need those kinds of tests as well. And you want to balance it and know exactly what you're taking instead of taking a standard 100 different things, narrow it down to the things that really are going to be individualized for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. All right. Well, some great advice on a lot of topics where, it's something that we definitely get a lot of, questions on.
Yeah. And if you need more information, pop in. Again, we always talk about, these are all things that, again, if you need more info, come in, get seen by one of the providers. I'm more than happy to do the testing and make sure, or guide you, or come into and get into the care team. So that way you'll have our nutrition specialist or one of our different team members, our exercise physiologist, nutrition specialist, help you to build something that's personalized around you. Thanks for joining us on one of this What the Health session.
What the health, guys? Don't forget.
All right.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the button.
All right.